welcome to another wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at Undaunted North Africa, which is a new game from Osprey Games. This is a sequel to Undaunted Normandy, and this is designed by the same designers as David Thompson and Trevor Benjamin. And so this is a follow-up to that game. It's not an expansion.
It's a standalone
game. But it uses the same core system, where it's this deck building, squad level game. Yeah. This is even more squad level than that one.
The scale on this one seems much smaller. It really is just a 4 or 5 man team.
Yes, and that's
just
kind
cool.
of the first of the major differences. Gameplay wise, the counters move and act in the same way, but the scale of it, where before you'd have a little rifleman squad. And so, your rifleman A squad, the cards would have 3 or 4 different pictures on it of the men that make up that squad.
Representing 4 different guys in a squad.
Yeah, here the cards are, like, I have an engineer, and my 4 engineer cards are the same because it is one man.
Yep.
And it represents their, like, hit points and endurance, all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit of a tighter scale than the other one.
And one thing we talked about as we played it was you don't have that other rifle company or that other rifle squad to rely on.
Yeah.
You just got rifle squad A, and that's it. If they die, they're dead.
Yeah, rifleman A.
Yeah, right.
And that's something to kind of bear in mind with this. The scale is a little bit smaller, and your resources are a little bit more precious.
Yes.
If your one asset dies who's got the demo charges, you can't really blow any of your buildings up and meet your objectives. So you got to take a little bit more care with your units. I felt like in the other game, I got just a couple rifle squads, a couple machine gun squads. Yeah. I can absorb a few hits. In this game, every hit you feel, every dice roll, you're like, oh.
Well, that first game we played, I think you rolled hits every time.
Yes.
And man, my rifle squad disappeared. I had 4 cards in my deck, and all of a sudden after that one turn, I think I was down to 1 rifleman. And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
There's just such a huge difference. Those resources are so scarce. And it makes you play very differently. It makes you play, I think, more cautiously. And you know that I'm not a cautious player.
Yes.
I dive in headlong and go for it. But so I liked that different nuance. I thought it was very cool. On the other side, as I was attacking you, I was thinking about that. I was like, I know he's only got 4 engineers in that, and he's got to blow these buildings up.
Yeah.
So I've got to suppress, and suppress is always easier, especially with the tank, because you're rolling 4 dice, and you usually need 7s, 8s, or 9s to hit because of the distance. But it made me focus on that, and I liked that. I liked that different tactical focus of these missions.
Yeah, that's the thing that I enjoy, because we played this and it was like, okay, what's different about this from the other title? What does this bring to the table? And that smaller scale, it's one man running between a pile of rocks and getting a bit of cover. It's I like that, and it's obviously that matches with the theme as well.
Yeah.
But you get...
Yeah, it's a commando theme.
You get into a little bit more tension in that way, because every asset is so important, and you can't really afford to lose any single one of them, because they do not have backup.
Yeah.
And
scouts was another thing. We were like, I just almost lost all my scouts, and I've still got to scout this location so I can move there. So, yeah, very cool. I will say that it made me see the recon element of the scout's ability completely differently than in the first game. Yeah. I didn't care. To be honest.
Interesting.
I didn't care about those Fog of War cards in my deck. Because I know I've only got 4 riflemen in there. They're going to come up. Whereas in the other one, I felt it was so key because you had 3 different types of riflemen. And you really wanted 2 riflemen together. So thinning that deck out became that much more important.
Yeah, yes. I agree with that statement to an extent. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I felt like in the other one, you can pour down a bunch of fire and do all this stuff, but there's many more options within your squad.
Right.
So getting that focused. Here, your squad is quite focused. I felt like... I felt that same way, but for a different reason.
Yeah.
I felt like I couldn't afford to spend time on those recon actions.
Yeah, because it was so fast and furious.
This is a very fast-paced... I felt this is a bit more fast-paced than the other one.
Well, and it's because... Why is it? It's because there's more opportunities to take actions because they're all the same squad. I feel like.
Yeah, your squad's not quite as big.
Yeah.
The range of assets is a little bit smaller, so your guys come up a bit more often. Mm-hmm. But also, the objectives... I'm not quite sure, but I felt like if I didn't go and do the objectives, I would lose my assets, in which case the game's over anyway.
Yes.
And in the other one, I felt like it had a bit more play. I could absorb a few more hits. I could be a bit more careful and set up some fire positions and make that work. You do that to an extent here, but I'm like, freaking scout, run the guys over, blow it up, get into some cover.
Yeah.
And so I felt like this game's at a faster pace in that way.
Yeah.
The games don't last quite as long.
Yeah.
But in that sense, I'm like, abandon the recon. Like I could.
Yep.
But then you can't do that in this most recent game we played. I had a ton of Fog of War, and it screwed up my last two.
You drew like 2 or 3 Fog of War in one turn. It's like
I did it twice in a row. And I'm like, So you can't totally abandon it, but I'm like, I can accept a few more Fog of War cards than I normally would have done.
And I also found that during the bidding for initiative, we were using more Fog of War cards because of that concept of I only have 4 cards. I got to use 1 for bidding, and then I only have 3 left for actions. I can't afford to put down a rifleman to win initiative. Now, there always comes that moment where you realize, oh my gosh, with the hand I got 2 riflemen. I've got to win this initiative.
Yeah, I got to.
So you'll use your squad leader and blow the initiative out of the water, move, and then control and win. So it really, I'm actually very pleased to see that the same system has been kind of morphed just enough to really feel different.
Yeah, it's not just the same thing again, and I appreciate that. But like you said, even from the initiative decisions, I feel like that's a bit even more important in this one. Of not only if and when you want to win it, but what cards you play to win it.
Yeah,
and a part of that's with your hand draw, but there's you're like, I desperately need to go first. But I cannot afford to spend these assets. Yeah,
I can't play my 7 to go first because, man, I need that 7 to bolster or inspire or command.
It's very neat in that way.
So the other interesting thing about this game is the vehicles.
Yeah, that's the other big draw.
It's a different feeling. These vehicles come, they're bigger cards, they sit statically on your tabletop. Yeah. And they have one counter on the tactical map that you control. But in the tank, you've got 3 seats that all can do different elements. You've got tank-on-tank ability with that anti-tank in the middle. You've got a driver who also can control, which was very, very different.
You just go park the tank on the objective.
Yeah,
that's your objective.
I control
go for it.
But then the crew member could do an attack. He could do a suppress. He could also move within the tank. So if I wanted to move from that seat, I could move into the anti-tank and then start doing anti-tank actions if you had a tank.
Yes.
So very interesting, those vehicles. There's about 5 or 6 different vehicles.
There's 6 altogether. There's a bunch of the scenarios where it's, the long-range desert groups in their little Chevrolets rolling around in the desert, going up against the Italian trucks, and they just got machine guns on top, just blowing each other. So some of the maps are a bit bigger, and you're roaming around doing all that stuff. And this is what sits out, and you have a couple, you might have a driver, and then you've got like a gunner who can then switch to the navigator seat, so it helps you go and find stuff.
That was the other thing. Are the vehicles all 2-speed? No, that one's a 1 as well. The tank's a 1.
These guys go a bit quicker.
The scout
drive
vehicle.
2, drive 3.
Okay. So they do have a good... We didn't use that card yet, but... So very interesting, the addition of those vehicles. I think that's just another element that just adds to it. There's also a very interesting recon aircraft card.
Yes.
That allows you to do some different things. So I think David and Trevor really have laid the system out to be expandable.
Yeah.
Meaning you can add different abilities, different options, and it just makes it for a more interesting and varied experience.
Without being more complicated.
Right.
I mean, the new rules in this, it takes 5 minutes to read them and figure it out. The one thing that I really liked in this, with Normandy, you know, we're just fighting over some objectives. Let's go and fight over this farmhouse and maybe this high ground over here. In this one, the Italians are trying to go and control, just like they were there, but the British, they're just trying to slip in and blow things up.
Yeah.
You got these objective tiles, and you have an engineer who's got his demo charges, and I like that because it functions a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily trying to go in there and like kill you off and then control it.
Yeah.
You know, you might have controlled it before and then have a guy, I can slip him in there, blow it up, and then run away.
Yeah, even though I
can try at least.
Even though I'm there and I'm controlling it, you can do that.
And that's good theme, and it just makes those victory conditions slightly less symmetrical.
Yeah.
And then there are scenarios where it's, you go in, do a thing, and then you have to escape. There's tiles that you have to exit off the board at. And it's bits and pieces like that that make it new enough where it's, you know, both of these games in the collection's not going to cross over too much.
You definitely have space on your shelf for both these because they're different. And we've kind of mentioned it or talked about it, but the decks are very different.
Yes.
You know, they're very asymmetrical, whereas in the first one, it's like you had 3 riflemen or 3 squads of rifle. I had 3 squads of rifle.
Yeah.
You have 3 squads of scouts. In this one, you know, it's not that same. You have different things than I do.
The force pools that you can draw from entirely different.
Yeah.
And I like that. I always like a game where there's a level of asymmetry because I know that's more complicated to design and balance well.
Right.
But seeing that stuff play out about, oh, you might have this big old tank, but my guys have a little bit higher defense values and stick them in the rocks and, well, I can get around or do different things.
Yeah.
I like that aspect of game design and seeing it play out. It's always fun to play around with how do I use my assets to their advantage. And you're doing the same thing. That's totally different.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
What I'll do is I'll show you the board and then we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So here's a look at the map. This is one of the scenarios. The scenario book has something like, gosh, is it 11 or 11 scenarios in them? And some of them are really big. This game has 22 tiles in it. They get fairly large in size, both wide and long. And you can see a lot of these have these vehicles in them. The vehicles, they have a little kind of a mat that you put out. This is just a display card. And it does have a corresponding larger token on the map. But as well as having your regular kind of units and how they function in this game, where you've got scouts roaming around and riflemen shooting and controlling things, the tank or any of these kind of medium and light scout trucks and things, they have seats in them, right? And they have a crew in them. So the driver sitting in the driver's seat, he can, as well as what's on his card. So the tank driver can do a regular move and attack if he has to get out, but he can also drive the tank and he can control an objective if he's in the tank. If he gets out of the tank, he can't control an objective, right? So there's a lot of nice nuance in there as well. But the tank's going to roll around, and depending on where your crewman sat, you can move him into the anti-tank seat so he can fire the main cannon. Or you can have him sat here where he's using the machine gun, coax, and he can attack and suppress with that as well. So there's some flexibility in that, in what you do and how you're doing that. If, for example, you're in the truck, you've got a navigator seat, or they can move from that into suppressing using the machine gun, and you've got a driver as well. So these are neat. They'll also have a number of hit points. They got 5 total hit points. If they take 5 hit points, it's blown up. But by the time they take 3 hit points, that's when the tank gets disabled. And just like regularly being suppressed, you've got to spend a card. Well, you have to take a repair action is what it is. I believe it's the tank crewman has this repair action on his card. If you do that repair action, he can flip it back over so it's functioning. But he's rolling around. He has this really strong defensive value. And if you look here, we'll compare it to the rifleman. The rifleman's defensive value is that 4 in shield. The tank has that 5, but it's got extra border around the shield, and that infers that it's armored. So you can't just hit it with small arms. Your rifle and machine gun bullets just bounce off the armor. What you need is something like this anti-tank rifleman. And the anti-tank rifleman has an anti-tank attack rating here. And his anti-tank has also got that border around it. That's how you know it matches up and it's compatible. So he can shoot his anti-tank value, his anti-tank rifle, at the medium tank to try and put hits on it. And you'll put hits on it as you do successful attacks, and eventually it'll blow up if you are so lucky. That's the major kind of addition to this series in the stuff that's new. Outside of that, you're building your cards, you're building your deck, and you're doing that in order to be able to have a nice variety of cards, and you get those actions. So you'll have a hand of 4 cards that you draw at the beginning of your turn, and I can activate my anti-tank rifleman, my sniper rifleman. I got a fog of war, which doesn't do anything, and then I've got my scout. So on my turn, I can play these in any order that I want, but before we do that, we're going to bid for initiative. So bidding for initiative, you look at this initiative value in the top, 6124. We're just going to play our fog of war because we don't necessarily care about that. And the Italian player is going to do the same. And let's say the Italian player plays this one. Oh, they've got a 5. So that means the Italian player goes first. You just reveal those. Whoever's got the highest goes first. But now I've only got 3 cards to play with. So the decision of who and what to play for your initiative and win, very, very important. So the Italian player is going to play their 3 cards and do all their stuff. And then it comes over to the British turn. And let's say they're going to use their scout. And the scout can take any one of these 4 actions. They can do an attack, they can do a scout, they can control an objective, or they can do a recon. Oh, conceal, sorry. It's a conceal, or they can do a recon. So to scout, this is my little scout counter. He can move 2, because it said scout 2. He's going to go 1, 2. And then for each of those places that you moved, you place the little binoculars symbol. That means this area is scouted. We know what's there. Once this is scouted, that means everyone else can move into those places. Normally, you cannot move into places you have not scouted, so your scout is very important as a pathfinder. You do have to keep them alive. That's why they have this 6 rating. You got to protect them, basically. So that's his scout action. Every time I scout, however, I have to add Fog of War cards into my deck. So the more I scout, the more separated we get, the more we're finding new things. My deck gets thicker with these useless Fog of War cards. And that's where that recon action comes in. So the recon action helps you, if you have any Fog of War cards in your hand, you take recon, you can get rid of the Fog of War. It goes out of the game. It'll never come back in. You get rid of it entirely. The conceal action is you being all stealthy and concealing yourself. That forces your opponent to draw a Fog of War and put it in their discard pile. So you can either remove them from your deck, or you can gum up your opponent's deck with those. The last thing you can do is you can do an attack if you are so inclined. You choose an enemy target, and we'll put someone in this space here. So I've got an attack 1. That means I roll 1 die for my attack. And the dice use a d10s. And you basically, I'm going to shoot this gunner who's got a 4 defensive value. The terrain provides another 1. And then it's the distance between us. So this is 1 space away. So it's 4, 5, 6. So we need to roll a 6 or more on our 1d10. Roll the dice, and I rolled a 9. Of course I did.
Of course you did. Not my gunner.
And then, basically, the opponent, if he has a gunner card in his hand, he has to remove it from the game. If he doesn't, he goes to his discard pile and removes one from there. If it's not there, he removes one from his deck. Once there are none there, the gunner is removed from the board, because he's dead. That's how attacks are resolved. If you miss, nothing happens. So these cards that you're building your deck with are also the hit points and the life value of your units. So they have a limited number of cards. So for the Scout A, he's got 4 cards. You start with 1 in your deck. If he dies, your Scout gets removed immediately, and you have to get these back into your deck. You can get more cards and then he's going to come back on the board, kind of back in the rear, and you've got to start all over again. And so that's why your commanders are very, very important. You'll have a number of these. Let's see. Here's my lieutenant, for example. The lieutenant has this bolster 3 action. What that means is from the pool of your available cards, just like any other deck builder, you can draw and put into your discard pile 3 cards. So you might get a couple of sniper cards and an engineer. What that does is that means you'll be able to activate them more often, and it also gives you them more staying power and a bit more life. You're effectively adding hit points to them, so they can absorb a couple more hits. The other thing commanders can do is this one can command, which means you have your little 3 cards in your hand after you've done your initiative. You play a command, you can draw 2 cards, and you've got a bigger hand. You can do more things like that. So your leaders are very, very important in this one. I think I had a warrant officer, and he can also inspire. What that means is if I play my anti-tank rifleman, I do an anti-tank attack. Great. If I inspire, I can pick this card up into my hand, I can use it again. So I might be able to do an attack twice. So there's a lot of really nice variety in what the cards do and how you use them, but really it's deck trying to get this good quality deck, trying to remove some of those Fog of War cards, use your units the best you can. The long range desert group, you're trying to go from cover to cover, use your engineer to blow up objectives. When the Italians are slightly more traditional, they're trying to control the objective, so they're trying to clear you off and kill you and pin you, and then go and sit on these objectives and control them. That's the way that they win as well. Some of the vehicles, like the tanks, very intimidating. So you're like, well, I'll just go around it, or I'll take my pot shots with my anti-tank, and hopefully we can make it work. But things like that are new to this, it adds a whole new dynamic to the game. This is very scary. He's going to come and sit here, but it's not necessarily the most mobile, and he's sitting there, trying to suppress some bits and pieces, while I will just go in the cover and do other things, and try and you got to try and figure out a way to do win a different way. And I appreciate that a game can do that. So this is the game, at least the core of it, and what we'll do is we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the map. Very similar, the map at least, with the tiles and how they lay out. The maps generally are a little bit bigger than the previous title, especially with the vehicles. It can drive around a bit more. Some of those later scenarios are quite big.
Yeah.
I think there's 22
tiles.
Well,
when you can move 2 and 3 tiles, you've got to have some distance. So,
but then then you get into like the maneuvering, and that's fun too. There's some differences and some really nice change in this one as well.
That is one thing I enjoy about this game is you have the same objective that you're generally trying to get to, but you have a different path to get there.
Yeah.
My side in these scenarios we played was a little less defended than some of your sides. And it's just interesting where I'm like, okay, he's going to move there, so you can kind of plan that out.
Yeah.
But you also are trying to plan your kind of most efficient route to scout and get to those. And I enjoy that. That's the way my mind works.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I enjoy tactical level games, because I feel like there's a lot of that. And you're going to get that in this game. You're going to get the same system, which I think is quite ingenious with the deck building and the ability to get rid of cards. You can even not only get rid of Fog of War cards, but you can recon your own guys. So if, let's say you don't need scouts anymore, you're like, okay, I'm going to recon that scout back to the deck to get one more card out of my deck, making your deck more efficient. We always like the phrase thin deck. I don't want a fat deck.
Yeah.
So those elements are all here, and this just adds a lot of more cool things. Just some next level stuff like vehicles, like tanks, and like assault trucks and scout. It's just fun. It's just fun stuff.
And it doesn't take any longer to play. That's one of the huge positives of this game.
30 to 45 minutes, I think, is generally what they are.
It sets out to be an easy to play war game, and it succeeds at doing that entirely. Yeah. It's fun. Almost anyone could learn this if you've played any number of board games, war games, anything, this is very easy to learn and pick up.
Well, and empirically, it's just a solid game.
Yeah, it's just fun.
I don't care if you don't like war games, if you don't like historical settings. This is an empirically good game. There's no doubting that.
Yeah.
Putting it on the table, playing it, even from the first time, I remember thinking this game's got something special. So we've enjoyed it. I also think this is going to continue to expand. There's a reinforcements expansion already announced for next year.
Yes.
And we're not exactly sure what that is, but we're kind of hoping it's some new scenarios, but it also will bring in a bazooka team or a...
Maybe it'll add vehicles to Normandy.
Yeah, I'm sure that's one of the things. I mean, you got to have some Shermans versus some...
That'd be awesome.
Panzers. I mean, that's going to be awesome. But
yeah, this is a standalone.
Yep.
Normandy's standalone. That's going to be an expansion. But I mean, there's so much room here to do more and more with what they can do.
I mean, you could do an East Front game. You could they could even modify the system to go into naval. I think that would be pretty interesting.
But Undaunted Stalingrad, how awesome would that be?
That'd be incredible.
That would be so easy to do.
Yeah. So David, we're giving you ideas. If you want to kind of give us cut us in on the royalties, we'll help you out. So, but yeah, infinitely expandable, and I think it could also go into other periods. I mean, you could do a Vietnam. You could do an Afghanistan. I know that might not be appropriate, or people might, we talk a lot about that. Recent wars are harder to make games about. But expandable.
But that speaks to the core system of this.
Yes.
That you can make some changes to the factions and the cards and the setups and the scenarios, and you can do so much with it.
And almost create an entire new system and experience.
It's
not a new system, but a new experience.
Yes. So here's the one question that everyone's going to ask.
Yeah.
If you can only have one, which one do you get?
And that's, as I sat here and played it, I really liked Normandy, though.
Normandy's very good.
This had some very interesting elements with the vehicles. I think the vehicles are very, very cool.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the tank. I enjoyed that. I don't know. What would you say? It's hard for me to come out and say it because I think Normandy is my favorite.
So with Normandy, it's a slightly more traditional, right? You've got rifle squads, you've got machine gun squads for suppressing fire, you've got mortars in the back, you'll have a sniper if you need one, so it's a bit more. You're controlling like a full platoon, basically.
It's like conventional warfare.
This is commandos sneaking around trying to blow stuff up. It's slightly less conventional in that sense. As far as I'm concerned, they're both equally good for what they do and what they say. So it's, to me, make that decision purely on a thematic basis, as far as I'm concerned. If you are into Commonwealth forces or North Africa, get this one. Mm-hmm. If you like the more traditional tactical Western Front stuff, go for that. Mechanically speaking, they're both excellent.
Yeah.
And the differences are there.
Yeah.
But you're not missing out too much on one or the other.
And like we said at the beginning part of the video, this really is a different experience. So my response to that would be, why not both?
Yes.
It's a different experience, different pace, different... the system's all the same, but it has some cooler elements with the trucks and the vehicles.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would say why not both?
Yeah.
But I do think definitely this is a very solid entry into the series, and I had a great time playing this.
Yeah, it's easy to... If anyone comes in and is like, oh, do you want to play some Undaunted? Yes. Every time I say yes. It's so quick and easy to set up and play, and you're done with it. You can play again, you play again. Yeah. And by the time you've done that, it's still half the time you would have played playing any of these, right?
You've still got time to throw a hex and counter game on the table and get 6 hours of it in. So
this gets a big thumbs up from us, it sounds like. I love this system. It's always nice to have some British forces in some of these as well. It's always fun to play your own factions, right? So that's always a big bonus for me.
And the other thing about this game, Osprey games, they don't do a lot of war games. They don't do a lot of historical games. Most of their stuff is Euros, and although they've done some very key war games, they do a fantastic job with production on this. Yeah. And to be honest, this one is like $35 to $40.
For the price, it's a no-brainer, frankly.
I mean, these tiles are amazing. The thickness, the counters are great. The card art is fantastic.
How have we not talked about the artwork?
Well, we haven't really talked about the production at all. But the artwork by Roland McDonald's, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's a different style. Not everyone's going to like it. I think that's something we made a comment last year, but to me, it's also empirical. I hate using that word, but it's nice looking. It adds to the theme and the. I feel like I'm here in World War II in North Africa as a commando because of what I see in front of me.
Yeah.
They even named the guys. I mean, he did enough research to kind of find out some. I'm not sure if every single one of them is 100% accurate.
Yeah, I don't know on that one.
But the long range...
It looks great.
Yeah. It's just... I don't know. It's just a very cool system. Yes. I enjoy it.
So, Undaunted North Africa, we love this system. Game's really good.
Yeah.
Good introductory game. Good experienced game. The more you play it, the more you'll... Especially if you're playing with the same player, you get into that mindset of... Oh, I know what the style that you do, so you try to do different things. Really, really cool.
I don't hold my face well either, so there's times I'll be like really sullen, and you're like, he's got nothing.
3 fucking walls. Yeah, right. I get it.
But yeah, this game really rewards a lot of additional plays to develop your strategies and understand what you're doing. I think this actually is a deeper game than you realize.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed this system. I've enjoyed playing it, writing about it, talking about it. And I can't wait for the future of it. I think it's got a lot of potential.
It does indeed. So appreciate you guys tuning in. This is Undaunted North Africa from Osprey Games. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.